Hello everybody, it's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. In this video, we have Michael from Katie Thurston's season of The Bachelorette and from Bachelor in Paradise, defending himself several years after being accused of price gouging, which is one of the worst business malpractice issues you could have to deal with, right? It's illegal to price gouge, but he was accused of profiting off of the pandemic. Of course, when new contestants come into the Bachelor world, they get Googled and people start looking for sinister things that they're not a good person and reasons for this and reasons for that. Well, then there's the, how do I respond? Is it worth responding and shedding more light onto this issue? Well, the damage is already done by a country mile here, where a good portion of online people think that he's a bad guy for selling masks during the pandemic. We're going to get into this. We're going to share his response to a lot of these accusations right now. He was on the Trading Secrets podcast, Jason Tartick's podcast. And it's very interesting for me because, you know, we cover these stories and then they don't normally get resolution. So, and then when a former contestant like Michael goes on a podcast, it is so important that we listen to his side of the story, because so often the problem we have in the media world is that you'll get the initial headlines, the initial point of view and perspective is made about somebody, and then you just carry that for the rest of your life. I know all the Tom Brady haters think he took air out of a football. He's got 7 Super Bowl rings. It's not from taking air out of a football, okay? It's the ideal gas law. All these things a simple 4th grader could have learned about why the pressure of a football deflates, and yet now, years later, if people want to hate on Tom Brady, they just say, oh, he deflates his footballs, which is completely inaccurate. And I feel like it's the same as being said for Michael here. Now, never met him in person. Seems like a nice guy, but the second I read this article that was questioning him, I called bullshit on it. Because when you look into it, he's accused of price gouging, and they're saying, well, a normal unit of masks costs $17. He was selling them for $29, or whatever the case may be. But they didn't even include how many products of masks were actually in each packaging. It was just it was pure speculation, and people ran with it. And now we get to hear his response. Do me a solid, follow me on Instagram at DNeals. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/Dave Neal, and every afternoon Bachelor Rush Hour, the hit podcast. If anyone wants to call into the podcast and tell me how life is going or have anything you want to share, by all means, the phone line is always open, 401-213-9828. If you want to leave a message, 401-213-9828. So Real Bachelor Jobs makes this Instagram post 2 years ago about Michael. And they say they have their full investigation is up. And because of that, there was a Reddit thread which linked to the investigation. When you click realbachelorjobs.com, you now get a password-protected private website, which means they took the article down. Michael also says when pressed for the information, when he gave it to them, they never responded to him. So we're going to get into all of this right now. Again, it's a lot, but it's very fascinating. And if by any means he's getting it wrong, I encourage the realbachelorjobs.com people to own up to their journalism and prove him wrong. You know what I mean? Anyway, here's what he has to say.
Is that you had a distribution company, and there's an article out there about the fact that you worked with your distribution to then get into the PPE space.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a writer who is criticizing you
it's crazy.
big time of taking advantage of price gouging during this time where people needed these supplies.
Yeah.
Trading Secrets, we talk about money, and we talk about how businesses work and operate and all of the logistics behind it. I feel like it's a good time to at least address that. Like,
yeah.
What's your take on that? Is that article misleading? If so, why?
Yeah. I mean, I remember this site created this article. They went on my distribution company's website.
Okay.
And if you look at if you Google Real Bachelor Jobs, you'll get snippets of what was said here. But when you click on it, it leads to nothing here. So you'll see that they say, we're fine that Michael never got back to us because he shared enough to make us realize that we weren't going to get explanations that made sense. When he did get back to them, they never responded to him, according to what Michael has to say. If they have any other information, we're happy to hear about it.
And they compared the PPE that we were selling, the prices during the height of the pandemic, to pre-pandemic pricing.
Okay.
So, as we all know, supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right? we didn't even want to get into the PPE business. We were approached by local hospitals and, first responders and frontline people because their tier 1 suppliers were not able to distribute to them. So we were placing large bulk POs, drop shipping them directly to them. So we weren't even hoarding supplies whatsoever. And what was really frustrating about that article was if that person had just, reached out to me before publishing it, I would have given them everything. Okay. And I actually, in August of last year, I reached back out to them and I said, let me know and I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah.
Clear the air. Never got back to me.
So they go on your website though.
Which is it? They're claiming he never got back to them and he's claiming they never got back to him. Now, it's good that this information's out there. If, assuming, I don't know if realbachelorjobs.com is a group of lawyers or journalists. I'm not really sure who they are or if they even still operate. But it would be nice after they put all that information out there. It's like farting in an elevator. At least admit you were the one who farted. Put the information out there. Even if Michael is responding 8 months later than you would have liked, now let's have a conversation here. Clear the air. And if you're wrong, issue an apology and try to let everybody know. The problem is, and here's the problem that I have. So he was dragged through Reddit and all these places. I have yet to see anybody now sharing his side. I've yet to see anyone who's called him a PPP scammer, who's called him this or called him that, to say, well, here's his response. No, we're too busy being excited to believe the initial report, and then we move on to the next bit of chaos here. There's just never follow through with these stories. And when the follow through happens, it's too little too late.
That you're selling these products. How would they use the word hoarding? How would they know what your supply was?
I mean, if you were to look at the article, they don't have enough information to even make this kind of claim. And one that is like something that goes against every.
So whether he was accused of hoarding or price gouging, he was saying basically he was drop shipping, which means if there's a mask company in China that wants to sell something for $20 per unit, he says, I got a guy who'll buy it for $22, and then Michael takes the $2, right? That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Thing in my body. Yeah. I would never do something like that. You can't accuse somebody of price gouging if you don't know what they're buying it for.
That's a good point.
And we weren't selling sanitizer and face masks before. So we never pretended to be the lowest cost provider. And also there were tons of other places in the marketplace where you could go purchase this. We weren't hoarding that. We weren't 3M.
Well, the one thing too is I know a little bit about this business. If the hospitals had their primary,
so then they basically share that hospitals also do their due diligence to search for the best price. And while he says he didn't sell PPP or PPE products before, he did run a distribution company. So there was expertise there. This wasn't just some guy who says, I want to get rich quick during the pandemic. He actually shares how little money he actually made.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, what was really difficult at that time, and anybody in this space could understand this, was shipping rates. International shipping rates. So we were having these things drop shipped from, some Asian manufacturing places. We were trying to make sure that they weren't counterfeit and that they were true, certified up to medical grade masks and things like that.
Yeah.
All right, and then they're going to get into the PPP loan issue, which he actually says he did take out a loan. We'll have that in a second.
Akron General Hospital, Children's Hospital, because we had a distribution company that did primarily clothing. Yeah. We had those kind of connections with overseas warehouses.
Yeah.
A lot of warehouses overseas during the pandemic, they revamped their lines. They stopped making clothes, and they started all doing, masks and things like that. And some of our best contacts over there started doing it too. So for me, it felt like an opportunity to, help out.
Yeah.
It felt like we could actually do something. It was a line extension. It wasn't our business plan. It was just, if we can do it, then we should.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and that was really it. That was really it. And honestly, it was like, if we can cover our costs, make some bucks off it, cool. But we weren't even able. We weren't even able to do that.
Okay, COVID, like this COVID 2.0, there's a lot of like talk about it coming back around. Knowing what you know now, would you probably steer clear?
Oh, I wouldn't touch it.
Wouldn't touch it.
I wouldn't touch it. And
Interesting.
I think people learned a lot during COVID.
Okay.
Just on the importance of, supply chain.
Okay.
And having
and I've said this too about the pandemic. One lesson we haven't quite learned, and we're working on it politically, is to bring jobs back to the U.S. We've made it so that we outsource so many jobs which are essentially done on child slave labor. We've made it so that we outsource the whole fashion world. I'm sure everything I'm wearing is outsourced to Bangladesh or China, places that don't have as strict labor laws. We really need to come to terms with making stuff back in the U.S., not just for pride in the U.S., but to boost the economy, and to know that if there is an issue, like we've got Detroit, right? This city that we just let go to shit. I love Detroit, but truly, there's so many just houses that you drive by. There, the roof's not missing. The city's a disaster. Flint, Michigan doesn't have good drinking water. We need to revamp a lot of these old factory spaces that we lost due to automation and overseas, and have them be storage for future pandemic issues, for future issues of any natural emergencies and things like that. FEMA storage. Like, we need to better provide our country with issues if there is another supply. I mean, imagine if we went to war with China. Imagine how we would just be cut off from this crazy supply chain of baby food formula and all these other things. Like, we need to better protect ourselves and not just worry about, well, this roll of toilet paper saves me 75 cents. Like, yeah, it'll be a lot more money. But if you get the whole point. Okay, so let's go to the PPP loan issue here. We hear them talking about price gouging and PPP loans.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
The whole pandemic was nuts. The one thing when people talk about just any type of gouging or advantage taking, still 2023, the thing I hear the most that just makes me sick is the amount of money that some business owners got for the PPP.
Yeah.
That weren't qualified for.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And we covered that as well. Some of the Bachelor folks that took out PPP loans actually were qualified. We had a bunch of videos. Brian Abasolo, of course, he had a brick and mortar chiropractor place. He had an actual business that, this and that. Colton Underwood, for all that we've criticized him for, had a PPP loan for his charity that paid the employees. Ari technically was able to receive the money because it was for his influencer job, probably because he pays himself, to lower his tax liability. But is that fraudulent? Well, it should at least be talked about. Then we have someone like Tasha who used it for the wrong reasons, which was to hire a new person. PPP loans were a payroll protection program. They were there to keep people who already were on the payroll funded. My guess is Ari didn't need the money because they had a second home in Hawaii, and that's why we shamed him, just to be like, dude, you didn't even need the money, take it back. And then Tasha, maybe she needed the money, but I think we all would love an extra $50,000 or $20,000 to hire somebody. That's not what it was for. So whenever people think I'm too hard on her, I'm just pointing out that it was done in bad faith spirit. It was probably people's accountants telling them, well, you need to jump on this, and then maybe they didn't think they'd get exposed the way they did, but that's how it works. All right, 2 more clips. They go to the rushing to judgments part. And look, could Michael be lying through his teeth? Yes, he could be. I haven't seen any of the evidence, but I just think it's so important. If realbachelorjobs.com, which of course now has gone private, which what does that say about their reporting if they're not standing up to it right now? And again, I don't know who they are. I have no axe to grind against them. But what does it say that they weren't able to work this out with Michael, and it was more like a sort of rush to the finish line of who could expose somebody else?
It's like a culture. It feels like we're running at a deficit where we're not curious anymore. Like, we're not seeking to understand. We're seeking to rush to judgment.
Interesting.
And I think that's incredibly dangerous and short-sighted. I really battle, and this is a different topic, and I think people back home might be able to relate to this as they think about being in the office or their employer, or maybe, making sure they're speaking up for themselves for the next promotion or something. I really struggle with,
do you address that elephant in the room or do you not? Do you bring attention to it or do you not? And the amount of times in the last, several years, I've just bit my tongue and just shut up.
Yeah.
And I still don't know.
It's hard taking those
if
punches.
that's the right thing to do.
So that was the general PR thought, right? We've talked about this all the time. If you're accused of something and you're innocent or whatever, just be quiet. If you respond to the accusations, you'll make it much louder. That's the Barbara Streisand effect, right? She was trying to get the Hollywood maps to not include the address of her home. And so she sued the Hollywood maps, and then that made her that much more famous, and it actually worked against her. So there is that idea. But I'm a big fan of like, look, if you want to heckle me, I'm going to respond to you. I'm going to give you back the exact energy you gave me, maybe 1% higher. I'm going to try to shut you up. And so when I'm mislabeled or something and I feel like I've been mischaracterized, I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond and talk about it because I think it's bullshit that we just let trolls and people online hide behind. Like, I don't know who realbachelorjobs.com is. If that was somebody who had a name behind it, and maybe they do, then you could say, well, let's look into you. Let's look into what you've done that's not perfect. Or did you price gauge? Or did you take out a PPE? Like all these, all these issues. And it's not necessarily fair to be walking in the dark and have a bunch of people hit you with, whatever. That's what's happening when you get attacked by someone faceless like that. You don't even know who to respond to. All right, we have one last clip here. And again, if Real Bachelor Jobs wants to jump on and better state their case or talk about it, by all means, I'm not trying to misjudge what they do. They just provided a lot of, this was selling for this at this time. Michael was selling this for that at that time. And they made this connection that wasn't exactly logical when I looked at it, but it was enough for people to go, you're right, he is a bad guy. So he mentions that in 12 months, he made $14,000, but he says when you factor in the cost of labor, he probably didn't even make anything off of it. So what is that? $1,000 a month, $250 a week. And if you have the time spent negotiating these prices or whatever, okay. So he made a few bucks, but it wasn't like he was setting his kid up for retirement by ripping people off during the pandemic, and that's exactly what he was accused of. All right, finally, let's hear Michael explain how much money he's making in his influencer deals.
50,000 followers.
Okay.
I think I grew about 160,000 followers from Paradise. A lot more brand deals kind of coming in. Things that kind of align with where I'm at in life. I'm on track this year to be, north of 200K.
In influencing deals?
Yeah, in influencing deals.
Wow, look at that. Making over $200,000 in influencing deals. That's why you go on Bachelor in Paradise. That's why you go through it, because there's still money to be made. Although Michael does come from the end plateau of when influencers were really making good headway, like Katie Thurston season, the pandemic. Right now, he probably would only get half the numbers. It's just TikTok kind of took over. It's more diluted, I think. I don't know. Some people are making good money, but that's pretty wild. Good for him. You go on the show, you can do whatever you want. It's a free market. You want to sell whatever you want on your Instagram, have at it, is what I like to say. And if anyone from realbachelorjobs.com wants to respond, we're always open to hear. I just want it all to be fair. All right, let me know what you guys think. We'll be back with more content right after this.